All right, our next speaker, his life should be made into a movie. His tenacity and grit will be sure to inspire you. A master business strategist. Cam will teach you his organizing principles for how to position your life, career, and business at the forefront of the world's emerging trends while sharing his profound and gritty personal story of overcoming catastrophic loss. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together. Give a big Vancouver welcome for Mr. Cameron Chell.
Huh? Thanks, buddy. This is awesome. Thank you. Got it. Thanks. It is not easy to speak before Tony Robbins. I just want to get that off my chest right now. Thanks for being here. My name's Cameron Chell, and what I hope to do with you today is to debunk one of the greatest fallacies that prevent us from true success. Now, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I'm going to be able to tell a story. And the reason that I am going to hopefully be able to debunk this great fallacy that we have in our society is because of a set of experiences and circumstances that I was allowed to experience. So today, what my life is all about experiencing love and possibility. And how I do that is by helping, just looking for the clicker to work. How I do that is by helping, here we go. Whoops, that's out of order. Sorry. By helping others create, right? And specifically, I spend my time with entrepreneurs, determining what's most important to them, and then figuring out specifically how to get it done. So before I get into some of those strategies, I want to tell you a story about how I got to the spot where I'm now lucky enough to get to do what I get to do. So when I was in my early 20s, it was pre-internet. I know I don't look it, but I am that old. And the internet was emerging. I had some computer businesses previous to that, and was a little bit of a techie, and just really enjoyed technology and what it could do, and was very fascinated with business. So my brother-in-law and I came up with this idea that if you had to go to Computerland, how many people remember Computerland? I know you're dating yourself. Wow, I am really old. And you'd get these discs, and you'd plug them into the computer, right? And that's how you'd load up your software, and then you'd use it. And then we're like, wait a minute, this internet thing, like it might be pretty cool if you could access the internet and run the software on a server somewhere, right? And totally novel idea. Long story short, we built this company called FutureLink. And FutureLink, in today's terms, would be a cloud computing company. And in fact, at least according to my story, it was the world's first cloud computing company. Now, back then, we had called it an application service provider, which was the equivalent of kind of like an internet service provider, an ISP, but you would be served up applications. Well, a little company called Microsoft got pretty interested in this idea, and they actually licensed to us Microsoft Word. And what we did is we actually started serving up Word so people could dial in, literally, and use this software without having to download it. Anyway, the company did well. We ended up getting a number of other corporate clients on board. And then this thing called the dot-com boom started to happen. Well, this was feeling pretty good because we had built this small company into about $80 million of revenue. Mind you, I'm like 25 at this time. And this dot-com thing is on. And we're growing at like double digits year over year. So we took the company public on the NASDAQ, and we accomplished a $3 billion market cap. So at 26, yeah, I mean, it was awesome. It was... But at 26, that made me the smartest man in the world, right? So you can see the problem that's starting to unfold here. So we hired this chairman, and this chairman is a very experienced guy from a telco, and he came in to become our chairman, and he was going to help us raise more money and take the thing to $5 billion, and life was good. And the problem was, he started acting like a chairman. And I was like, sir, I'm in charge. We kind of got that figured out, right? And it was kind of like the classic, kid who was too big for his britches, didn't know what he was doing, had too many people letting him do what he was going to do, wouldn't stand up to him, and this chairman, who I hated at that time, I mean, he was the bane of my existence, taught me a great lesson, and he fired me. Right? He fired me he was like, you are that arrogant little prick. I don't care who you think you are. I'm like, you obviously don't know who I am, right? So the next really big problem happened. I quit, sued the company, got into a lawsuit. This is a true story. My mom was a shareholder. They sued my mom for $80 million, right? Now, the whole thing got settled, and it was a bit ridiculous, and egos were completely out of control except for mine. And so to prove the fact that I was right and I didn't have an ego, I was going to start another company. So we did. We started in fact, we started a bunch of companies because we're so smart we could do all kinds of things. And this company was also in the application service provider space. Another company was in the online gaming space. One ended up going to about an $800 million market cap. The other one ended up going to a $4 billion market cap on the London Stock Exchange. And now my life is perfectly out of control. Jets, homes, anything that anybody could ever think they wanted. It was all in the pursuit of this. And I'm not saying this is a bad goal, because in fact, this wasn't the goal. The goal was the satisfaction of my ego. And the great fallacy that I've been talking about here is the fallacy of the Lone Ranger, of the great entrepreneur, or of the upstanding, amazing business person or mom or whatever that has to do everything on their own and prove the fact that they're right. This is their self-worth. Their self-worth is wrapped up in accomplishment. Now, wait a minute. You're going, wait, dude, Cam, we are at a self-improvement seminar. We're talking about goals. We're talking about accomplishment, and you're saying we're on the wrong path. No, what I'm saying is that if that's what it's about, you're going to experience the same thing that I'm about to tell you about. It can't be about what's most important to me. The notion of being amazing and getting everything done is hollow, not because you make it and then you realize, oh my gosh, I'm alone, or people don't like me, or all that kind of stuff. No, it comes down to a couple of things that I've been lucky enough to discover through my experience, but also through the work I get to do with people now. And every speaker today, in one way or the other, has touched on this. There's really two things that we want to experience as humans that provide us with fulfillment. And that is, we want to love and we want to create. Those are the only two things that really bring us fulfillment in one form or the other. So chasing all that stuff down, the chase is all part of the creation, and you get wrapped up in the busyness, and you actually kind of at times don't need love, or you're replacing love with admiration, and it becomes hollow. So my life was out of control, but it looked perfect. And then something happened that unraveled it. And what that was 9/11. So on the morning of 9/11, I was walking into the towers. And as I entered the first tower, I heard what I thought was an accident outside. Didn't think much more of it. Other than that, well, that's actually not true. Because as things unfolded a little bit, then there was chaos in the building, and it wasn't quite chaos yet, it was more bewilderment. Realized something had happened. And people were starting to say, hey, a plane hit the building, but believe me, it wasn't like something's happened. It was like, something's going on. And my first thought wasn't about the people or the situation. My first thought was, I got a meeting in Midtown this afternoon. The traffic's going to be terrible. I got to cut this meeting short. That's how self-centered I was. And I didn't think I was being self-centered. I thought I was being smart. I was like, I got to get a jump on people. I got to think about the next thing. Well, a few minutes later, hell did break loose. Because when that second plane hit, it was like an earthquake. It was not even an earthquake. It was like, it wasn't real. It wasn't possible. It was absolutely impossible. The notion. I got outside, and that's when it snapped. And I didn't know it snapped in my brain at that point. But as we're leaving the building, and I say we, I mean, it's a collective we that's trying to figure out what's going on. And if I step right, something falls on me, a person, boxes, and I'm dead. I step left, I run into somebody else who's crazy injured and isn't going to live. I run straight, I might live, I don't know. I stand still, I could live, I don't know. At that moment, I realized this notion of being in control, of being the one that always is going to be smart and on top of it and do all the disciplines and make sure you're up early and run all the strategies and do all the self-help things, all the things that we all want to and need to and do, don't matter. I'm completely lying to myself if at that moment I'm going, wait a minute, I woke up early, I did my exercise yesterday, so I have better intuition, and I can run faster, and I'm smarter, and so therefore I'm going to live, and the person beside me is not. Doesn't work that way. It's completely out of our control. 100% out of our control. And it was the worst thing that I could discover in my life at that time. So I made my way from downtown into Midtown. And as I happened to have a BlackBerry at the time, and that was the only network that was working, so I was actually able to make calls. And one of the calls I made was back to California, because I wanted to check on my son, and I wanted to let them know that everything was okay. And I got on the phone, and he had taken his first steps. I was like, dude, it's like, I should be dead. But then I'm hearing the most amazing news in the world at the same time. And you may not think that's important until later that night, for the first time, what I wanted to do, I wanted to get drunk. I didn't want to be in control for the first time because I realized I was not in control. No matter all of the stuff that we do that we're here to learn today, I could not control it. So I took a drink. Now, up until this point in my life, I was not a drinker. I'd never smoked anything. I've never, I tried to be an amateur athlete for most of my life. It was just not in, it just wasn't part of, I would be disciplined. That night, I got completely drunk. How many people have been in New York and know how busy it is 24/7, right? Lexington Avenue, I was staying at the W Hotel there on Lexington Avenue, and it's like all day long, all night long. You could have shot a cannon down Lexington Avenue. The odd car would come whipping around the corner and go by, and I don't know what time of night it was, but I got out in the middle of the street, and I laid down. And I was like, okay. And of course, I'm gunned. I'm like, it's over. It's done. I've never had a suicidal thought in my life before this. But I thought, okay, I'm going to lay down. It's done. I'm out of control. Let's see. Let's see how this works. And then I remembered my son walking that day. And I was like, no. There's some control. I don't have to be here in this spot right now. It's not total chance. So I got up, and I went inside, and I got through that night. I was in New York for a couple of weeks because you literally couldn't get out. To fast forward the story, the drinking turned into drugs, and the drugs turned into harder drugs. And within 6 months, I was basically disappearing months at a time. And the problem was I had the means to disappear months at a time. I'd get on one of my jets, and I'd go somewhere, and nobody would know where I was. Now, I made sure I had everything I need to stay disappeared for a month at a time. And that was my routine. And when that's all you care about, and when that's all that can make sense, this is where you end up. So I went broke, completely bankrupt. And I ended up I ended up in a lot of places, but the last place I ended up was here on the east end of Vancouver. Now, I know in a crowd this size, there are some other people who have lived on the streets of east end of Vancouver. And I bet there's some people here that I know or who I've seen there. It's just statistically not possible for it not to be the case. So you know what I'm talking about, and you know that environment, and that's where I lived. And for the longest time, I didn't have to live there because I had friends. I had friends that would constantly come and pick me up and hire PIs and find out where I was at and basically force me into a rehab from which I would sometimes stay and sometimes leave, countless times in rehab. Right? Some of those friends are here today. But I couldn't break the addiction. It wouldn't happen. One day, on the east side, there was a particular gang that didn't have a liking for me. Apparently, I still had not given up my arrogant, cocky ways. And this gang would constantly beat me up. So I saw them coming one day, and it was literally a couple days before that they had beat me up, and I had just gotten out of the hospital. And I knew if I got another beating, I'd be done. And I knew I had to run. So I ran. And the only way I could get out of Vancouver at that time was to call a friend. It was my old CFO. And another friend of mine, who's in the audience here today. Thank you, Dave. And I would call them. Now, these guys had heard from me all kinds of times. They'd heard every story imaginable from me, calling and saying, hey, I need to make rent, and, my check's not coming, and, can you wire me some dough? And, by this time, they were on to me. And nobody would be supporting me. Nobody was coming anymore to find me and put me in rehab. There was no enablement left. So when I called and I asked for help, help started to show up. But at this point, I had finally hit my bottom. I actually could not get anywhere without help. Now, the problem was everything in my entire life was about me doing it, me accomplishing it. That's the only validation I had. That's the only reason I had friends. And now I was really finally at a spot where I had to ask for this help. And so they started to give me the help. Now I've been clean a little over almost 9 years now. Thanks. And the lesson I've learned from that is I could not do it on my own. So let me just draw a couple of examples around this, though. At age 27, I did 101 bungee jumps in a row. It took me 23 hours. You hang upside down for 8 minutes in between stopping bouncing and getting untethered and going up again. And we raised money for a charity in doing it. I got willpower. I can do things. One time I was horseback riding on my ranch, showing off, and a horse bucked me out of the saddle. Rather than just like getting out of the way and landing on the ground, I was like, I'm going to ride this thing. From Alberta. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Now, the problem was this horse was from Alberta, too. So as I was determined to stay in that saddle, which I wasn't, I was now out of the saddle, coming down, and the horse was coming up, and the horn of the saddle, and, well, split my pubis symphysis in half, right? Ambulance to the hospital, passing, pain, right? The delirious pain. I get to the hospital. I'm there for a number of hours. I'm finally on enough pain medication, which I really liked, which should have been a good indicator I should stay away from that stuff. So by the end of the night, the surgeons and the doctors tell me, okay, Mr. Chell, we have to compress you back together. We actually have to screw your pelvis, your pubis symphysis back together, and you're going to be in compression for 6 weeks. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Like a girdle? And they're like, in bed. I'm like, this was like a Friday. I'm like, on Sunday, I'm taking a red eye. I always take red eyes, saves more time. My wife's rolling her eyes right now. I'm taking a red eye to Chicago because we have a financing to complete. And they're like, you're not going, like, do you understand the gravity of what just happened here? And I said, I don't care about the gravity. I'm going to Chicago because I'm getting this financing done. On Sunday, I took a red eye to Chicago. Right? I remember going through the airport at about, Mach minus 100. The financiers were laughing at me. I was a joke. They were like, what are you doing? You're completely out of control. Right? We did get the financing done, but I have willpower. I could not quit using drugs, no matter what, until I finally had to accept help. And that is the only way I was able to accomplish something. So the lesson for me out of this was the fact that no matter what it is you do, and no matter who you think you are, if you think you're doing it on your own, and if you think you're that hero, we can go through every piece of history of the person who thinks that is, and I can tell you, I will take that story and I will show you that the reason they're successful is because of the people around them. Now, they may be playing a certain archetypal role, and you may be playing that role too in your organization or in your family or whatever the case is. There you are, Dave. And you know what? You may think that's your job and your role. But the only reason that success is happening, whatever you're defining as success, is because of that culture that you have around you. So as I started to translate this back into my business life, right, as I started to get a little bit well again, and I wanted to get back into business because I love that creative process. I mean, it's incredible. I started to take these lessons and apply them to organizational culture. And I can tell you today that the only competitive advantage you have is your culture. Culture trumps everything. People will say, oh no, it's location, it's technology. We have the best people. I'm telling you what, those things can give you advantages, competitive advantages at certain or specific pieces of time, but other people are smart. They're going to hire smarter people. They're going to catch up to your technology. They're going to challenge your IP. The only thing that's competitively differentiating you from anybody else is the culture in your organization. That is it. And so how do you scale culture? So we've developed a system to scale culture. So since that time of getting off the street and back on my feet, we've honed this system and we've started to apply it. A couple of the companies that we've created since that time, for example, is a company called Earthcast. It's a Vancouver-based company. I don't know how many people may or may not have heard of it. It was actually on Phil's list this morning. It was one of those top 5 companies he had up there. And the idea that we had around Earthcast was we wanted to compete with Google Earth. Right? That's a smart business plan. How many people have been to Google Earth before? Isn't it super cool? You go there the first time and you see your car in the driveway and you're like, oh my gosh, that's the sprinkler on, and you're like, this is the craziest thing, right? How many people go to Google Earth a second time? Right? 3 months later, you go look again and it's the same picture. Right? That's not so cool anymore. So the whole idea was, well, if we just refreshed the satellite imagery, every couple days, we're going to get a whole bunch of visits and we can sell some advertising. So that's how we're going to compete with Google Earth. Well, what happened next was the fact that, we thought bigger. We thought, oh, no. Let's figure out how to make this live video. The end result is that we did a deal with the International Space Station, and we put live video. We have the rights to the International Space Station, and we put video on the outside of the cameras, or on the outside of the International Space Station. Today, it's a multi-$100 million company, and we did it using this system. And the culture in that company, it has beat every satellite company out there in its discipline. And it's done it because there wasn't somebody that tried to be more than what it was. It has an incredible culture of being able to work together, and it uses our RipKit system. So I'm being told my time's up, so I apologize, so I'm going to finish with this. We take this system and we put it into a weekend. But this weekend is designed around the most impressive performance culture in nature. And that culture is a wolf pack. So what happens is we take our software system that we've designed and built around this process, and we train you in it. But then what we do is we just don't give you the actual training piece of it. We actually give you the experience of working with the wolf pack. So this is a real wolf pack. And you spend time imprinting with them. And you actually learn what the organizational dynamic is within that pack and how you hold people accountable and actually how you build culture. And that dynamic is the same organizational dynamic that's in the winning organizations in the world and also within very successful families. It's because of the experience of adversity, and it's because of the experience of realizing that you can't do things alone. And if you talk to Zuckerberg, or if you talk to Bill Gates, or if you talk to any of these folks who are the pinnacles of our success, they will be honest with you and tell you that it was not them. The media story is a lie. You have to do all the disciplined things that we're learning here today. But if you can't do it in a culture of creativity, and if you can't do it by being and giving love, literally, it isn't sustainable. If you take anything away from today, please just know that you can't do it on your own. And you're not supposed to do it on your own. Right? You don't have to do it on your own. Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, Mr. Cameron Chell, let him know. Come on. Cameron Chell.